Hi, everyone. Welcome to Power Shifts. My name is Joseph Lavoie, and this week we have a fun one. We're deconstructing two political attack ads, two different political parties, and what appears to be one playbook. It's a great time to be a political junkie, isn't it? We have one hell of a federal election on our hands in Canada with so many fascinating storylines. And no matter what side of the political aisle you sit on, I reckon we'll be studying this campaign for decades to come. Or we can start now. This week, I thought it'd be fun to deconstruct and analyze a political communications device that is a staple of every campaign, and that is the attack ad. We all pretend to hate these ads, but in truth, they often work. So we can clutch our pearls, or we can try to understand what makes them so effective. The big takeaway that I think you'll see as we go through these two ads is that we often accuse the other side of being nasty with their attacks, but the truth is they're much more alike. Okay, so let's start. Our first is from the Conservative Party of Canada, an ad that dropped this week. It's called "Canada Can't Afford a Fourth Liberal Term." I'll play it here first so you can listen to it and see it in full.
Why does Trump want a fourth liberal term?
I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a liberal.
Because Mark Carney will continue the same liberal policies that have made Canada weak. He'll keep oil in the ground.
Oil reserves, proven reserves, need to stay in the ground.
And he'll keep liberal laws that block mines, pipelines, and energy projects.
We do not plan to repeal Bill 69.
Keeping Canada hostage to the Americans.
It's to our advantage, actually.
Canada can't afford a fourth liberal term.
All right, let's dig into this video. It may only be 30 seconds, but it packs an incredible amount in that time. Let's start with the storytelling. Here we have a crisis narrative. This video uses crisis storytelling to create urgency by depicting Canada at a critical juncture. Why? To motivate immediate voter action, to create urgency, and to spell out what's at stake if Canadians vote for a fourth Liberal term. So this narrative encourages voters to reject continuity, represented by Carney, to get out of the crisis. We also see here a classic problem, villain, solution structure to the attack ad. The problem? Well, Canada's economically and politically weak. The villain, Mark Carney and the Liberals. That's reinforced through their association with Trump, or with Carney's association with Trump in this respect. The solution to that problem? Well, of course, reject Mark Carney and the Liberals. We also see here simplicity, crisp, straightforward messaging with clarity that makes it instantly understandable and memorable. The word choices are precise. They are emotionally charged. We got words like weak, hostage. We talk about advantage to the Americans, which should cause a reaction from voters who are concerned about sovereignty and economic security. All right, let's take a look at association and framing now. We see here a classic use of guilt by association. The ad associates Mark Carney with Donald Trump in a negative way. No surprise, given how unpopular Trump is with Canadians. And shock, a little foreshadowing of what's to come next. This is also a hook that the Liberals will use against Pierre Poilievre. But with respect to this video, the Conservative campaign has felt this pain point since before the writ period. Being seen to be associated or liked by Trump is not a popular move in Canada right now. So by starting the ad with Trump's quote, suggesting a preference for Carney and the Liberals, Conservatives frame the Liberal Party and Mark Carney as aligned with foreign interests, specifically American interests led by Donald Trump. The goal here? Invoke suspicion and distrust. We also see here a loss and weakness frame. The video highlights the big losses Canadians face if voters select Mark Carney: economic harm, resource industry decline, and geopolitical vulnerability, tapping into fear of economic and political weakness. Negative framing is effectively employed here, associating liberal policy decisions with national weakness and vulnerability. Lots of emotional triggers to look at. We have fear appeals. So this video explicitly raises fears of economic vulnerability. Canadians are being held hostage by the Americans. Economic stagnation, keeping oil in the ground, and job insecurity. block mines, pipelines, and energy projects. The script writer clearly wants to tap into voters' fears around economic insecurities, foreign dependency, and weakening national strength. We also see here emotion over reason. There are no facts in this video. It's all about feelings. The explicit invocation of Trump is to create a visceral reaction among Canadians who overwhelmingly reject Trump's values. Then, once they have that reaction, transfer that emotion onto Carney. All right, a good attack ad, of course, has to define and construct an image of the enemy. It's what we call enemy construction. There are two aspects in this video that I note. The first is establishing an external threat by quoting Trump. And the line is, it's to our advantage, actually. The ad constructs Trump and the US as external threats benefiting from weak Canadian leadership. And this implicitly positions the Conservatives as protectors of Canadian national interests. We also have internal enemy framing. The ad frames Carney as a continuation of Liberal policies that are harmful, implicitly identifying Liberals as internal enemies, undermining Canadian prosperity and sovereignty. You also see this in nearly all attack ads these days, which is using their words, using direct quotes to construct the ad. And so the use of real quotes from Trump and Carney adds some credibility. Even if these quotes are taken out of context or they may be simplified, as is often the case in these types of ads, they give viewers an impression of authenticity or enough to raise their eyebrow, all while suiting the ad's framing and narrative. Of course, an attack ad is ultimately intended to drive contrast of some type. So we do have contrast and we have implicit contrast here. By continuously pointing out the harm of Liberal policies, economic weakness, the American advantage, the ad implicitly contrasts these alleged harms with an unstated but implicitly understood alternative. And that's, of course, Conservative policies and leadership. The viewer, you, are invited to conclude that the Conservatives offer protection, economic strength, and independence. There are a couple communications frameworks that are at play in this ad. We've got agenda setting, issue ownership, and priming and framing. So let's go through each of these. Agenda setting. This defines the election's primary focus as economic and national security concerns, forcing Liberals into a defensive posture on their economic record, and thereby positioning Carney negatively in voters' minds. So that's agenda setting. Issue ownership. Conservatives traditionally own economic and national security issues in voters' perceptions. They typically do very well on those issues, poll after poll, and issue after issue. This ad leverages these established biases by framing Carney as economically irresponsible and politically naive. And then finally, priming and framing. This ad prepares voters to evaluate Carney through a lens of economic failure and national insecurity. And in so doing, priming the audience, priming you to receive him unfavorably before Carney has a chance to frame himself. So when we zoom out, this ad is textbook stuff for a reason. It leverages proven persuasion frameworks, framing, emotional triggers, agenda setting, doing so to leave voters emotionally unsettled and wary of Carney. And so in that sense, it follows a playbook to a T. Its vulnerability lies potentially in the backlash from voters who might view the Trump-Carney connection as too contrived. The backlash may just come from the fact that Carney seems to be performing very well in the polls on his ability to manage tough economic issues. And so is it too much of a stretch to suggest he'll be economically hurtful to Canadians? I don't know. Obviously, we'll find out on April 28th. But there you are. That's the assessment on that ad. Let's now move on to the Liberals' attack ad on Pierre Poilievre. You're going to see it's going to sound a bit different. The words are going to be a bit different. But as I walk you through this, you're going to see there's so much overlap. There's so much similarities between these two ads. Okay, so let's cut to the Liberal ad, and I'll be right back.
How do you address the concerns of being too closely aligned to a foreign government that is threatening Canada and is destroying its own country right now?
Well, your question is false.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken.
The left-wing censorship regime.
Their woke censorship ideology.
Defeating the radical left.
Radical, leftist, authoritarian. It's not the Americans' fault. It's our fault. We're stupid.
All right, this liberal ad does not hide its intent, does it? It makes Pierre Poilievre look like Trump, and it uses it lets these two subjects do all the talking, doesn't it? All right, I'm back. So that liberal ad does not hide its intent whatsoever. It makes Poilievre look like Trump, and it lets these two subjects, Trump and Pierre Poilievre, do all the talking. And you'll see we do have a lot of overlap with the Conservatives' ad here. Proof that, frankly, both campaigns are using tried and true political communications playbooks, even if they sport different colors. But there are a couple twists, so let's go through them. We'll start again at storytelling. And here, again, we have a crisis narrative. The video frames Canada at risk, suggesting that Pierre Poilievre is importing dangerous political ideas from the US. And those ideas are, of course, coming from Trump's America. They're implying that Canada stands at a tipping point. This narrative structure creates urgency and clearly conveys what's at stake if Canadians elect Poilievre: the importation of divisive American-style politics. We also see in this one, as we did in the Conservative ad, problem, villain, solution, storytelling framework. The problem in this case is that Canada faces potential social and political deterioration. The villain, of course, Pierre Poilievre, depicted as Canada's Donald Trump, an importer of divisive American populism. And the solution to this problem, of course, is to reject Pierre Poilievre, to protect Canadian democracy, and probably more importantly, what they're trying to get at with this is stability. The simplicity of the language here there's an interesting twist because the language is clear, it's direct, and it's repetitive. But the twist is that all this crisp and clear messaging doesn't come from a narrator. It comes from the two subjects. It comes from the mirroring of Trump and Poilievre's own words. And it uses that crisp language against them, right? We hear things like everything is broken, the radical left, censorship, authoritarian. All these words are very crisp and clear. And that's because, well, Pierre Poilievre is a crisp and clear communicator, and Trump can be when he's in his game. And so there's an interesting twist here where that simplicity is a result of their own words, not necessarily what has been written into the script. But they are chosen. The words are chosen to provoke emotional responses. They are chosen to reinforce perceptions of extremism and, again, more importantly, instability. Okay, so that's our storytelling. Let's look at association and framing. Here, too, we see, as we saw in the previous ad, guilt by association. The ad directly links Poilievre to Trump through synchronized quotes. Given Trump's high unfavorability among Canadian voters, this association is politically damaging. By aligning Poilievre's rhetoric explicitly with Trump's, the Liberals frame him as dangerously out of step with Canadian values, prioritizing suspicion, anxiety, and distrust. And this has been Poilievre's Achilles heel in this campaign, and the Liberals with this ad are pressing right down on it. We also see, as we saw in the Conservative ad, in this Liberal attack ad, we see loss and weakness as one of the core frames that's being put to us as the consumer. The video subtly suggests that Poilievre adopting Trump's rhetoric weakens Canada by importing political dysfunction and division from the US, tapping into Canadians' fears of political instability, polarization, and declining democratic norms. We also see very similar emotional triggers at play in this ad. Fear, appeal, and emotion over reason. So on fear, the ad warns voters of political instability. We hear the hook around the journalist asking Pierre if he's destroying his own country. We hear themes and references to social divisions, the radical left and woke censorship. The ad aims directly at voters' fears around importing American-style polarization and extremism. And on emotion over reason, the ad operates primarily at the emotional level. So again, like the other ad, rather than offering evidence-based critiques, it uses dramatic parallels and Trump's inflammatory language to generate strong, negative emotional responses towards Poilievre. The goal is to make voters feel deeply uncomfortable about Poilievre's potential leadership. And as we saw with that conservative ad, there isn't a single fact in this ad. It is purely emotional. Let's take a look at what enemy we constructed, or the script writers constructed with this ad. The first is external threat. It frames Trump and American politics explicitly as dangerous external threats. And it does this by highlighting Trump's aggressive, divisive rhetoric. It positions the conservatives and Poilievre specifically as conduits of foreign ideology incompatible with Canadian values. And this is something that the Liberals are often very good at, is contrasting against, quote unquote, on Canadian values that the Liberal Party brand has long been associated with. We also see here as well internal enemy framing. Pierre Poilievre is constructed explicitly as an internal threat, bringing harmful and polarizing American rhetoric into Canadian politics. This framing positions him not merely as an ideological opponent, but a genuine threat to Canada's social cohesion and democracy. And as we saw with the conservative ad, here we are using their words, direct quotes, the parallel structure, pairing Trump's words directly with Poilievre's near identical rhetoric is an absolute killer. It enhances the perception of authenticity and credibility by using their own words against them. This method gives voters tangible proof, reinforcing the ad's narrative without needing further explanation or interpretation. The contrast element, again, as I say, attack ads are a contrasting device. We have as well here implicit contrast, as we saw in the other ad. So by directly associating Poilievre with Trump's rhetoric, the ad implicitly contrasts Poilievre's divisive style with an unstated yet implicitly understood alternative: stable, inclusive, and Canadian leadership. The invitation to you, the reader or the viewer, is to reject division in favor of continuity, harmony, and stability, qualities that are implicitly associated with the Liberals, or so they hope, and the polling numbers would suggest they're on the mark with this one. It has become, while Trump is increasingly has started the campaign as the ballot question, the secondary ballot question is connected to that, is around stability, and this is what the Liberals are trying to drive at with this ad. They are the implicit, stable option in the mix. We also see here the same three communications frameworks at play as we saw in the conservative ad: agenda setting, issue ownership, and priming and framing. Let's go back to the top, agenda setting. This ad strategically sets the election agenda around preventing American-style polarization and extremism, and it does so by associating Poilievre with Trump. The Liberals force conservatives onto a defensive terrain, compelling Poilievre to justify or distance himself from the Trump comparison rather than advocating proactively for his own platform. And this is the reason why this is an Achilles heel for Poilievre, is that there is an element of the core conservative base support in Canada that does hold favorable views towards Trump. Now, that base may be shrinking, but it's not gone. And so this is a wedge that the Liberals are trying to drive at hard with this ad. They're also driving hard at issue ownership. So they being the Liberals, traditionally own values related to inclusivity, moderation, national unity among Canadian voters. And by framing Poilievre as an extremist influenced by Trump, the ad reinforces these voter biases, implicitly casting Liberals as protectors of Canadian democracy and unity. And finally, on the priming and framing, the video primes voters to evaluate Poilievre through the lens of Trump's negative attributes: authoritarianism, extremism, divisiveness. It's been one of the stories of the campaign. Liberals seeking to remind Canadians of the association many of them make between Trump and Poilievre, whether it's fair or not. What's my assessment of this? Well, I quite honestly think that the liberal ad is the superior attack ad for two reasons. One is that the cognitive dissonance is palpable from the very start. So early in the ad, we see Poilievre's defensive statement, his response to the reporter saying, "Your question is false." That's juxtaposed against his own rhetoric. And that forces viewers into a cognitive dissonance. And the viewers must then reconcile his denial with what appears to be explicit evidence of his mimicry of Trump. This technique intensifies psychological discomfort and distrust, and combined with the mirror imaging we see throughout the ad, the combination, I think, is vicious. I also think it's the superior attack ad because this one reads the moment very well. It implicitly relies on Canadian exceptionalism, which is undoubtedly the current vibe of the country, positioning the US, Trump's America, as politically dysfunctional and divided, contrasted against our self-image as moderate, as being a moderate and stable place. Ultimately, that then triggers national pride and anxiety about losing our uniquely Canadian political values. So I think it taps into the moment right now. Canadians continue to rally around the flag, and I think this ad does a good job of tapping into the right frequency at the time. Where does this leave us at the end? Well, of course, attack ads are not subtle, but subtlety is not their job. They succeed because they trigger emotions, because they exploit fears. They draw clear battle lines. In this election, conservatives and liberals have leaned on nearly identical strategies in the sense of weaponizing associations with Trump to discredit their opponents. Now, the liberals have been doing this from the very start. The conservatives are doing this a lot more recently, but it's a sign that Trump is very much on the ballot question on April 28th. I hope you found that interesting. If you do, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel or on Spotify, or find me on Substack, where I originally penned this analysis. You'll find me there at powershifts.pro. Thank you so much.